but I can't. And
Shall I can record. Oh, Dixie's recording, so that's lovely. Thanks, Dixie.
Okay, thank you, Dixie. Okay, let's colleagues, let's start. It's 10 o'clock now, and I would like to start by saying good morning to you all. And on behalf of the teaching development team and the LT Collab, I would like to thank you for coming to the second Ingxoxo. For the benefit of our colleagues who does not understand isiXhosa and were not here last week, allow me to explain briefly what Ingxoxo means. Ingxoxo, colleagues, means a robust discussion amongst people who want to have a workable solution on a challenge or a problem. It is also a discussion to find means that could be utilized to improve initiatives. The Ingxoxo that the teaching development is hosting are a check-in space to get a sense of where we are and where we are at in the transitioning to the online and remote learning. They are not necessarily focusing on sharing experiences of remote and online teaching only, but also on asking questions, sometimes difficult questions, because it is through asking difficult questions that thinking can be stimulated around how we can support our students to finish the 2020 academic year and maybe beyond. Sometimes we'll have panel sessions and sometimes open sessions. For example, today we are having, we are hosting an open space session. And then last week, as we know, we had a panel discussion session. And the main aim of today's Ingxoxo is to share our continuous assessment stories. We hope that you will all listen to one another's stories to learn, unlearn, and relearn with the aim of improving our continuous assessment practices. We have one overarching question, which is, what is your experience of continuous assessment? We'll have some questions during the Ingxoxo that will hope that the session will take 1 hour of your time. And but we understand that we can go further, but it's okay. But we put 1 hour, and we understand that people have different things that they have to attend to. Colleagues, it has been observed over the past few weeks that one of the main concerns of both students and academics has been the transition to continuous assessment. That this transition, like any other transition, result in confusions and vulnerabilities and anxieties. We wish to use the Ingxoxo to minimize any anxieties that may be there by clearing some confusion. Jenny and I will be facilitating this Ingxoxo today, and we would like you to mute yourselves when you are not speaking, and please use the chat space on another mean to get the Ingxoxo going. So Jenny and I decided to draw from Nancy Klein's thinking process to ensure that the quality of our attention determines the quality of your thinking about continuous assessment. So before I hand over to anyone who would like to start, as I already said, this is an open session or open discussion. We don't have panelists. And I would like to ask you to note that we go with the flow. Anyone who would like to start can jump in and start. And if there is a bit of awkward silent moment, there are people that are here today that they know that I am comfortable to pick on them. And before I hand over to you colleagues, to anyone who would like to start, I will say, Jenny, any 1 or 2 words that you want to say before we hand over to the colleagues. Jenny?
Sorry, colleagues. I don't really have anything to add at this stage, except to say that the issue around continuous assessment has been raised, as Champ said, on numerous platforms. We were concerned about it, and Prof. Foxcroft is concerned about it. So it is just an attempt to respond to immediate concerns of both staff and students that we hear today. So yeah, that's really what Champ has already said. So I think we should probably try and kick off and see where people are sitting in relation to it.
Okay, who would like to
add, can I just add here, for people who want to talk, just click on the hand so that the facilitators can see that they need to talk.
Good morning, Sue Petratos, if I may start the conversation.
Yes, thank you, Sue.
Okay, great. So this is actually a very timeous meeting, and I think it's very important for us to have these discussions with a lot of modules that have now switched over from being examinable modules to be continuous assessment modules. I think there are a few things that have fallen through the cracks. For example, some lecturers have just merely replaced their final exam with an end of module assessment, which is a very big assessment for the students. And that is totally against what continuous assessment actually means. So I think in some cases that is already happening, and we are going to be too late to try and do anything about that. However, in other cases where people have put in a lot of effort into changing their modules from examinable to continuous assessment during these times, they have put in extra effort with regards to creating extra assessments and different types of assessments. A lot of the concern is with regards to the number of hours that they put into this. And then if there are staggered pathways, as well as allowing students to do reassessments, how much more of these type of assessments do they have to create? So I think going to continuous assessment has created a huge workload for the staff members who are actually putting in the effort to do this correctly. So yeah, at this point in time, also maybe I can just add that we are at a university level looking at guidelines for continuous assessment modules. It's not with a response to the COVID situation, but rather in general, there are no real guidelines with regards to continuous assessment, moderation, feedback, and all those type of things. So there is currently a small task team of which I'm leading that is looking into all of these problems as well, and that is why this meeting this morning is so important for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue. Does anybody like to respond?
Penny has her hand up.
Yes. Good morning,
And
everyone.
Maritz, well, after
I touched on this yesterday in another meeting, and I just want to express my concern here is that a lot of our modules have not been designed for continuous assessment. Well, in the science faculty, in fact, most of our modules have not been designed for continuous assessment. And what lecturers have done is they've just taken these modules and dumped them on their Moodle sites without changing the way the module is presented. And that itself doesn't lend it to continuous assessment.
No.
So I think staff need to be educated into what continuous assessment actually means and how you actually need to adjust your teaching methods to make continuous assessment possible. That for me at the moment is a really big concern.
Penny,
Thank you.
Can I respond to that, Champ?
Yes, please, Jenny.
I just wanted to say that this is one of the things that's come up as a real issue again and again, Penny. I think the first thing that seems to be happening is that there's a confusion between the meaning of continuous and continual. So In some cases, although not the ones you're talking about, it means that lecturers have been over-assessing all the time. So that's something we'd need to deal with. The other thing is that there's certainly been some immediate transfer of traditional assessment practices straight onto the online site, and that clearly isn't what continuous assessment is. I do know that some faculties are well aware of this. They have explicitly in their meetings said, we know it's not continuous assessment, we haven't got time, it's too much to ask the staff to do this. So for now, that's what we're doing. It's a pity, but it is just the fact of it. We're all working on the hoof, if you like. So it really has been a pressure for some people. But it is a concern. Yes, go on, Penny.
Can I just add to that? What is really worrying is that the students are picking up on it, and they are feeling the discomfort of the lecturer through what is being presented, and this is adding extra stress to them, because a lot of them, I'm the academic advisor for the science faculty, and a lot of students have contacted me saying that this is not what they signed up for, and they are terrified of failing on Pathway 1, because a lot of them are speaking from the inexperience of the lecturer's perspective.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's very useful. Thank you very much. Can you just expand a little bit on what you said earlier about in science in particular, the modules haven't been designed for continuous assessment? I'll tell you why I ask you that, is that in some modules, though obviously not in all, but in some modules, the shift across it obviously involves extra work and a different lens on the assessment practice, but it is possible within the same learning outcomes. But perhaps it got to do with your labs and the pracs. I don't know, I'd just be really interested to hear why in science it's of particular concern, the switch across.
Yeah, this is a tricky one to discuss, because it's not so much content. In my opinion, science is the perfect platform for using continuous assessment, because one aspect builds on a previous aspect. So it's important to know they understand concept A before they move on to concept B. But I think we sit in a situation in science where the lecturers that we have aren't really pedagogically educated. So their main interest also is not really teaching. They want to do the research, and the teaching just happens as a, I've got to teach, so I teach. So for them, the traditional talk and chalk, and we give the students a set of notes and they've got to work through it and come back to us if there's a problem. That's the general approach. So the big problem is to change the educator's mindset to see the value of continuous education, because at the moment, continuous education for a lot of them, I'm not saying all of them, but for a lot of them, particularly the old school research-driven lecturers, they look down on continuous assessment as something that is not as stringent as 2 semester tests and an exam, if you understand what I'm saying.
I do understand exactly. Yes, but that's a very important point, isn't it? Because you're not talking, it's a big issue, and it's something that one needs to try and address along as we go along, but it's not got to do with the intrinsic nature of these modules. It's got to do with something different. And that's important, because if we say it's impossible to move science online, that's a different thing from saying many of our staff are resisting moving science online. So yeah, it's a very important distinction as we think about it.
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of lecturers are saying science can't be moved online purely because they don't want to.
I get that. So that's
and I don't want that minuted anyway.
No. Okay. We are recording this, but it doesn't go public.
Yeah, no, that was just a joke. It's just that some people get rather uppity when you take them on about it, because this has worked for decades. So why should we change it now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another thing compounding the issue is that it all has happened so quickly because we had to. I mean, it was an emergency situation.
Yes, yes. I also find it quite ironic that something that the science faculty or certain departments in the science faculty has been kicking against, which is this online teaching and continuous assessment, we've actually been given no choice to. So in Afrikaans, there's an expression that says "die blinde sambokkie." You know, when you cause trouble, fate seems to come and slap you on the butt and get you back in line. So I sort of quietly chuckle and see it as something like that.
Okay. Can we move to Maritz? You've had your hand up for ages. And we have somebody else as well. But Maritz, do you want to make your point about the integrity or something different?
Thanks, Jenny. Now, I want to comment, first of all, on something different. Let me first of all say I'm not an expert in continuous assessment. In mathematics, that's not something that we are used to use. But my understanding, and it will be good if the experts can correct me or not, one of the biggest components of continuous assessment is the fact that you assess smaller chunks of work at a time. So instead of a traditional exam where you will have a single assessment on all the work of the whole semester, you would have a number of smaller assessments, each one just on a smaller chunk of work. So instead of an end of module assessment consisting of a test or an assignment on the whole semester's work, it will only be on, let's say, the last part of the work. So that's the one issue that, this is how I see it, and I would like some comments on that. And then the other issue of concern is the integrity, not of continuous assessment in general, but specifically if it's conducted online.
Okay. Champ, do you want to comment on those points? Okay, maybe Champ's not online. Yes, I think, Maritz, as far as assessing only small chunks is concerned, I think there are a few points we need to make. The first one is that if you're assessing with continuous assessment online or offline for that matter, it's up to the lecturer to decide exactly how those assessments link to each other. There's absolutely nothing to stop you from having a couple of short formative assessments and then something that asks the students to apply and combine all of those things. So it doesn't mean that there's no summative assessment at all. What it does mean is that 2 tests and a big 3-hour exam is not continuous assessment. But in between that, you could easily have a 1-hour summative assessment task for students to do, or an open book task for them to do where they have to integrate and apply. So it doesn't mean that you're only testing short, sharp things with bullet points and nothing more. And I do think that that is something that we need to sort of dispel. It's not just an easy option. It is a way of ensuring that students have a chance to build their knowledge as they go along, have a better chance at succeeding, not because it's easy, but because it is frequent and because it builds. So as you go along, you could have a summative assessment at mid-term, for example, and at the end, you can certainly have something that is bigger. It doesn't mean that they're all short and kind of weightless. You can have quizzes which weigh less than a bigger test, but not something that counts 60% where all of the rest counts 40. So it is a balance, but it's a balance that's perfectly acceptable within the continuous assessment model, if you like.
Thanks for those comments, Jenny. What we're doing basically is, what I'm planning is, yes, the traditional 2 tests, but each of them only on half of the semester's work, and in between, on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, a short 10-mark or 15-mark quiz, and none of the assessments contributing more than between 30 to maybe 40% of the final continuous assessment marks, which is different from the old system where you would have a single exam that on its own would contribute 50% to a final mark.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, it's up to, in some ways, some schools, for example, have recommended a 30-70 split between the summative part and the formative part of the assessment. Can I just check? I'm sure everybody here does know, but does everybody know the difference between summative and formative assessment? Because please, if you don't, please say so. This is what this is about. Okay, so the formative parts then would count. Now there's no golden rule, except that it's not the same as the traditional one. So in that sense, there is a big golden rule, but within that, there is space for flexibility, and it sounds like that's what you've done. The issue, though, then is, are we over-assessing our students? And what happens when 4 lecturers all start testing with numerous formative and summative assessments? So that's another balance that has to be struck. Just for the moment, we've got Noluthando. Are you still wanting to speak? I can't see your name here, but you had your hand up earlier.
Sorry, Jenny, before Noluthando.
Noluthando, are you there? You?
Yes,
Jenny,
I'm there, Jenny. I'll wait because Champ wants to speak first. I'll wait.
That's fine. Champ?
Okay. Jenny, I'm so sorry. I muted myself. I was talking and I couldn't understand when you started talking, when you said I must contribute. Sorry about that.
Oh, shame. Not a problem. Okay.
Okay.
Not a problem.
So yeah, you covered.
I just want
you covered everything, Jenny. But I wanted to say that it's very important. You keep on stressing the importance of not over-assessing our students. That is very important, and I would like to remind our colleagues to look at the notion hours for each module that they are teaching, because that will tell you, that will guide you on how much you are going to allow for teaching, learning, and assessment. And another thing I wanted to add on is the online assessment. I am going to talk to the team, our learning technicians, and see how much they know about that one, the integrity that one would like to guard against, and then we'll have a session on that one. That is, if my colleagues can have a session on that one. So that's it from my side for now, Jenny.
Okay, thank you. Charmaine, you've been waiting a while, and then Penny. Charmaine, would you like to make your point?
It was Nobuntu, Jenny. It was Nobuntu first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nobuntu. Sorry. Yes, it was. Sorry. Nobuntu, would you like to make your point? Noluthando, sorry.
All right, Jenny. Jenny, all that we have been sharing, you would remember last week, that is the adaptation struggle. Because yes, both the lecturer and the student, we all experiencing this for the first time. Nobody planned for it. We must all admit that we are all having learning experiences because yes, some might have experienced something similar in 2016 with Fees Must Fall, but both from the student's point of view and the lecturer's point of view, we are all adapting to the situation that we have at the moment. I also want to say that there is nothing wrong with having a summative assessment.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong at all. But to me, it is how part how you assess and what your intention of assessing is. Rightfully so, Jenny, as you say, that, you know, multiple assessments doesn't mean that that is correct. Even perhaps it could be that even shorter assessments are not. The webinars that I have attended that are run all over the country seem to pick up and say it is how you do it. I mean, we have taught students about plagiarism with assignments, but now at what we have, knowing that if you're speaking about undergraduate students and you're wanting them to write assignments, we've got to watch and know what resources are they using, because it's not, they're not having libraries. Some are not so fortunate that in their areas there are resource centers and regional areas. So we've got to watch what is it that we're assessing and how we are assessing. Whether as a lecturer you think group assignment is viable at this moment. And it is so important because even students, if you talk about plagiarism, it's not that they don't know, but at the same time, you've got to look and say, what resources do they have? Are they using articles to do this assignment because there's no library in front of them? Are they having access? Remember, they have limited time because the data that they have, they've got to keep for a certain period. It's not endless. Whilst we're saying that, we expect the same to the lecturers. You know, so it's an adapted. I think we all have to learn from each other. We all have to adapt. Let's not say this. Let us correct. We are adults. We are lecturers of students. We have to correct it and show them how to do them rather than wanting to penalize, because we are not in their shoes. We do not know the adaptability struggle that is occurring just in front of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that point. That was well said. Thank you. Charmaine, can we move on to you, please?
Hi there, everyone. Maybe I can just come back to the point of the continuous assessment regarding the smaller chunks. My experience currently is I'm getting a really, okay, so my background is I teach students how to program, undergraduate students. I'm finding a very high volume of plagiarism, direct copying of each other's work with all the mistakes and everything in, with no effort put in to even make a change. So I started threatening them, and I'm finding this week is a better submission. But that beside the point, the smaller chunks I'm finding are not providing the insight that an integrated assignment that would give. So I'm finding the continuous assessment, if I may say so, quite more difficult to manage than 2 semester tests and an exam. So I'm trying to get these smaller chunks and give them opportunities to resubmit and improve and this kind of stuff, like trying to follow the true process of continuous assessment.
Yes.
But what I plan to do at the end is I plan to give them an assignment that is going to take all these bits and pieces and put it together. And then the summative thing is going to be a short thing that's going to ask them a reflection on their particular design and their particular implementation. Yes. So I will mark the two together because it's going to be very individualized. But to try and get it across to the students, you know, plagiarizing is not going to help you when we come to that thing.
Yeah,
what I'm doing to help them is I'm giving them a practice one. So I'm taking a little thing and I'm saying, this is the kind of thing that you would do. Here is a practice question. Would you be able to answer this question doing the work that you've done? I don't know how this is going to work, but I am finding it rather difficult to manage. I understand they're plagiarizing because they're under a lot of pressure to submit a lot of things for a lot of modules. But we're just doing the best we can. I'm just trying to be okay.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's a very constructive contribution, Charmaine. And I also think it speaks directly to what Noluthando was saying about the adaptability struggle. You're saying, look, I'm finding this hard and we're doing the best we can. I think your idea of, I think the way in which you are planning your summative assessment at the end speaks directly to some concerns around integrity. I really understand that we're worried. Some people are very worried about plagiarism. But if we work out a way of assessing where plagiarism is not really an option, it's an individualized reflection on your own design, as you said, then I think we circumvent a lot of those worries. Look, there are no easy answers to this. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but there are ways in which we can assess our students to test for understanding, to look and see how students are making meaning out of what they've learned, and if they are. So all of those things come together. So thank you for that contribution. I think it's been very useful. Penny, I think you've been waiting, and then Sue.
Thank you very much. Something that came up in our faculty learning and teaching meeting last week is that there are definitely some departments who are over-assessing. And because students have to pay so much attention and do so much work for those modules get far more Moodle time than the other modules do. So they focus on the modules with these weekly assessments and the others lag behind. That has definitely been the case with some of our modules. Because we assess less at the moment, we've been sacrificed at the expense of others. And the department who is assessing weekly say they are doing this to keep the students working constantly. But we need to distinguish between working constantly and assessing constantly, because it does put an unfair pressure on the student, and very often at the expense of other modules. Thank you.
Yes, I think it speaks directly to the importance of communicating across. I mean, we are renowned for a lack of communication, all universities, between different lecturers in different modules, even at the same year. So we don't often get good articulation between the understanding between lecturers about Penny's doing this and Linda's doing that, and this is how they link, and this is the task demand, etc., etc. So it does speak to the importance of talking to each other, of using either these fora or reflection sessions within the faculty, whatever you choose, to say, how are you going, what are you doing, how many assessments have you got, etc. So we actually know what the students are being confronted with. What we do know is that again and again, let's just cater for those who are overreacting. Again and again, the students are telling us we cannot manage this, we are totally overwhelmed. And even those who have good internet access. So I think it's a question of balancing out all these different responses and trying to map a constructive way forward. And I think that's why your response, Charmaine, was one that I think was very well useful. They've all been useful today, but it does help us to put the difficulties alongside the innovation. All right, Sue, you've got your hand up for a while. Had your hand up for a while.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd just like to come in here with a different method of doing continuous assessment. A lot of the engineering and the IT modules are using a portfolio style of assessments, where the students are actually working continuously and building small blocks and improving. So they have an opportunity to actually improve on their previous submission, and then go ahead until they get to the end of their portfolio, and then that gets assessed as one, as the final outcome for their module. However, during the course of the semester, they are having an opportunity to improve. I'd like to find out what are some of the people that are here this morning doing with regards to reassessments of, for example, something like a portfolio, as well as during the course of the semester, if any of the submissions or the assessments are failed. How are you handling the reassessments? I'd really like some advice on that.
Anybody like to comment? Torgo, can I just ask you, please, could you close your screen? Because I'm not able to see who's got hands up at the moment on my screen. I think you've got something up on the screen that you've shared with us. Maybe not intentionally. Is that right? Am I right about that? Has other people got that?
Yes, we can also see it.
Yeah.
Just click on your share screen, Torgo.
And I'm interested, maybe she wanted to raise her hand, maybe.
There we go. Torgo, did you want to say something? All right, let's just go back to Sue's request that people indicate what they're doing about reassessment. Perhaps before we do that, can I just say something about portfolios? An end of module portfolio is a very common thing, Sue, in any faculty. So I know engineering does it and does it very well, and it makes perfect sense in the context of engineering. But it makes a lot of sense anyway. At the end, students can put together all of their assignments, whether they're formative or summative, and see that as the big summative assessment at the end, often with a reflection. So I must say that's a practice that I think is very useful. But other people, in terms of reassessment of portfolios, has anyone got experience of this?
Yes, if I can come in there.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Tony.
If I talking about reassessment, we already have had a few continuous assessment modules before this lockdown situation. So what we found works with in terms of reassessment is you would have done your normal assessments throughout summative, formative, case studies, assignments, tests, etc. throughout the semester, and each of those obviously have a certain weight towards your final mark. When it comes to the reassessment, we'll give the student an opportunity to do a combination of assessments in terms of maybe they had there was a case study and an assignment that they can redo that would then make up their what would be effectively a reassessment, as opposed to one large re-exam, to try and keep it fair in terms of how things were weighted and how things were assessed during the year.
So what
as opposed to have, because if you have one, if you had one big reassessment at the end to replace 40% of the mark, that's not really how the module was designed from the beginning. So trying to keep in line with the original design of the course.
So what you would, what are you saying? You would identify the weak spots and give the student a chance to resubmit those. That's what you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. You would have seen throughout the semester that certain sections of the work maybe they didn't do so well, and give them a chance to redo those sections to improve their mark.
Right. And presumably the resubmissions can also happen during the course of it doesn't have to go to the examiner and be failed necessarily. If it does, they can they can be reassessed, but they can also resubmit during the course of the module. Is that right?
Correct. I have some colleagues who do it during the semester, so they'll have a reassessment for a particular. They would have earmarked certain assessments which can be reassessed, or the student can resubmit and improve their mark. Yes. And then some colleagues wait until the end of the semester and then have that month, the month after the end of the semester, where they will now do reassessments for the highlighted areas. So there's no hard and fast rule. The key thing is then just when it comes to the moderation side, that both before and then after, you would have gone to your moderator and explained this is what you have planned, and they can obviously give as well some advice as well as to how best to run it, and afterwards giving a portfolio to the external examiner of what was done and a sample of all those various assessments. I think is the important part as well, for the integrity of the process.
Yeah. So your reassessment process, what students reassess is the continuous assessment equivalent of a SUP, basically. That's what you're offering the students.
Correct.
Yeah.
Jenny, may I add something?
Yes, of course.
On the reassessment of portfolio, I like Tony's method of doing it. And I want to draw to our colleagues' attention that, as Noluntu has alluded to, the context matters. The context matters, and we understand, we know who our students are, and we know where they are from, and we know what their strengths and limitations and challenges and everything that they have in their spaces. That is very important. And another thing on reassessment of portfolios, one of our colleagues, I'm not sure who now, mentioned the fact that we have, this is an addition to a workload. So reassessment is another additional workload. But what helps a person is to have a rubric to mark the portfolio. If you have a rubric and it is well created, so the student and yourself understand what needs to be done and how, that helps a lot. And then before the actual submission date, you will give them time to actually assess themselves, and then they will communicate with you, and then they will go and pick and select the best assessment that they see within the continuous assessment to include in their portfolio, and then thereafter have the reflective piece, and then you are going to assess according to the rubric, and then you give them opportunity to go and reassess those assessment opportunities that they didn't do well on, in order to get a pass mark. So that is my 2 cent piece for now. I will add on later.
That's great. Thank you very much. Dixie, you've said in the chat bar that you're experimenting with different online assessment practices. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Okay, I've just written a long thing in the chat.
Yes, I see that now. Yeah.
Storm's message. We've been experimenting with using random blocks in setting it up in responders, because it's easier to set up there, in a Moodle quiz to create test papers. So this means that for every section of a test paper, you need multiple questions. The more questions that you've got per section, the more randomized the actual test papers will be, and therefore the more unique. But that means that when a student actually is going to write the test, this is the EMA summative assessment, they start their test, and automatically they will get their questions. And their mates in their study group will probably get different questions, but not necessarily. So it's not foolproof, but it does make it a little bit harder for the students to actually then copy stuff. Also, our submission software that uses checks the student solutions, the students have to start with their own starter file, otherwise the software picks it up, so they can't just submit somebody else's file either. Yeah. It's not free, but it's we were trying to limit the opportunities for. And then the third thing is to bring in a time limit. So while the test will be available in both night owl and daytime hours, once the student starts the test, they will only have a limited amount of time to complete it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, can I just thank you very much? That's really very useful. I'm wondering, Storm, in response, I think Dixie was responding to your request for a webinar. I'm wondering, Dixie, do you think would you be prepared to offer a practical session on how you go about doing this? Is that, I'm not as familiar with Moodle as some of you are, so is that something that would be an option? Is it webinar worthy is really what I'm saying. I'm sure the idea is, but is it a difficult thing? Is it something that could be demonstrated to good effect to people, for people like Storm, who's requesting a webinar or something similar?
Sorry,
yeah.
Jenny, I can't. Sorry, Jenny, I can't see the chat space. What is the webinar for exactly that is requested?
How to use quizzes in such a way that it prevents students from plagiarizing. And Dixie's just responded to multiple questions, and the more there are, the more randomized the selection students have. So it minimizes the possibility that students work from each other's material.
Okay, may I respond on that, Jenny?
Sure.
We're having a model training Thursday this week, concentrating on using quizzes. So that will be covered in that training as well.
Oh, will it? Okay, I understood that to be more basic. Okay, that's fine. Are those sessions still available, Champ?
Yes, they are available. On Thursday we have like 3 of them. Yeah, and they are repeat. So if you have people that didn't sign up for that and would like to do so, I would advise them to send me an email, because we are keeping the groups very small because it's a training session and it's hands-on. But I can accommodate other people, and I will allocate them across the 3 sessions that are there.
Thank you, Champ. That's very useful. Thank you very much. So, Storm, it is already there. If you'd like to try and see if you can find a time on Thursday to attend one, I think it's 3 options you have. Maritz, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, could I quickly just
Yes.
say something here before Maritz comes in?
Sure.
Learning how to do this is much easier to do it in responders than actual Moodle itself. So the responders needs to be combined with Moodle quizzes in the webinars.
Okay, Champ, is that happening in the webinars as well?
Okay, Jen, we will look for that one as well.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Maritz?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Champ about those webinars that is coming up. I tried to enroll for some of them through Karen Grobler, and it was indicated to me that some of those are full. And specifically the one on quizzes, I originally couldn't get in because I was told it's full. She later found a space for me because of somebody else withdrawing. So one must just check probably with Karen if there are spaces. The other webinars what is advertised on YouTube and voiceovers of PowerPoints is unfortunately also indicated to be full. So maybe a request that those be repeated more times for more people to be able to attend.
Thanks, Maritz.
Okay, Jenny, I got Maritz's email, and I'm still going to respond to his email. I got his email, and
Okay.
then yeah, we are going to have more of those, and I'm going to send him the recording as requested.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. Thank you, Champ.
A pleasure.
Does anybody else want to ask a question, make a contribution, express a concern at this stage? We have a few minutes left. Okay, well, if not, let me try and just identify some of the things that have emerged out of this discussion, just to try and... Yes.
Linda's got her hand up.
Sorry, Linda. Sorry, Linda, I didn't see. Thank you, Linda.
I know. Yeah, I pressed the wrong button initially. I have a child who is at home who studies at another university. So I've been watching how he is being taught and how he is being assessed. So the block and changing the questions per student is done. And it's very strictly timed, in that if there are 5 questions, they work out about 10 or 15 minutes per question. If you've answered question 1 and you go on to question 2, you can't go back.
Okay.
The other thing that I thought was quite interesting that we haven't discussed is he does a mathematical course, and the answers are multiple choice, but he then has to submit his working out on a piece of paper. He's got to take a photograph of it and he's got to submit it to the lecturer, so that whether he gets it right or wrong, the lecturer can see his working out. So
Yes,
I'm not sure how, we don't have to scan it. I think he just WhatsApps it and sends it to the lecturer. So that works very well.
yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that sounds like really good practice, because it sounds as though what the lecturer is doing is giving marks for the working, even if it goes wrong at the last minute, if it's right up until,
to actually see that the submission of that student is according to what was worked out.
Yes, yes.
So it is a way of double checking original work.
Absolutely. It is that, and it's also a way of assessing. Yes, right. Got it.
And just the other comment that I wanted to make, but I think it has been dealt with through everyone else's comments, is some lecturers don't understand the purpose of assessment. So there are still many lecturers who like the two, one test in the first term, one test in the second term, and an exam at the end of the semester. And that is for a mark. So they need to put a mark on the system, they need a mark, and so that is done. And assessment is then not being used as a learning tool for the student. Right. So I like continuous assessment if it's used as a learning tool.
Yes.
So the student must then get feedback before the next assessment, so that it's not a once off, you failed, but now we're going on to new work. You're not going to be asked anything on the one you failed until it's in the exam. So part of continuous assessment allows a lecturer to gauge the level of learning of the students. And I think that's beneficial. Whether the students then feel they're being assessed too much, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you. The whole question of assessment for learning is really very important, rather than assessment of it right at the very end. Dixie, you wanted to say something? I think we need to make this our final comment before I hand over to you, Champ.
I just wanted to add about giving them opportunities for resubmission to improve what they've done. So if you have a resubmission opportunity, they can actually improve and therefore learn from the feedback from the first submission and still improve that submission. So having that resubmission opportunity, I think, is also quite fundamental to continuous assessment.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's at the heart of it, really, because it's really making as much opportunity for students to make meaning out of their learning as possible. We know in the traditional formats that students don't read anything that's at the end of an assignment that's already finished. If it's closed and finished, they often not bothered to read the comments. If they know that there's a chance for resubmission, then they are likely to read the comments and learn from them. But it also speaks to our way of constructing our feedback, which then excludes all the single word, clarify, what's this, etc., which students cannot make any meaning of at all. So yes, there's a whole lot of work we might want to think about doing in relation to feedback and developing that. Champ, we might want to think about that. I don't know. Dixie, have you said what you want to say? You've still got your hand up. Do you want to speak again?
Sorry, just forgot to put it down.
Okay, no problem. Champ, would you like to say something final before I try and wrap it up?
Okay, I think, Jenny, from my side, so I'm going to do this. Short observations from the whole session, and then you will consolidate, and then thereafter we'll ask Chantel to thank everyone, and then we'll say our goodbyes. Okay, from my side, I liked somebody's contribution that we must learn from each other during COVID-19. And as Cheryl Foxroff always say, let us make things as simple as we can going forward, because this is not an easy time, and it needs us to connect more than ever and to understand who our students are. And I liked Linda's contribution that she saw her child doing whatever they are doing from other institutions. We can copy that, but then when we implement, we must think of our context. So another thing that is very important is that the assessment role players should sit together and plan going forward, because if we don't do that, then we will really over-assess our students. And lastly, we always talk about assessment for learning and assessment of learning, and very important, especially with continuous assessment, is assessment as learning. That is the reflection part of assessment. Yeah. That is, students are being assessed, given feedback, and they reflect on the feedback in order to improve their performance and experience. So that's me from my side. I'm not going to get in again. I would like to thank everybody from my side and say goodbye to everyone. Over to you, Jenny.
Yes, thanks, Champ. I really don't have anything more to add to that, other than if I said any more, I'd probably be repeating what Champ has said. I think that's a really nice summary of our discussion so far. There's lots more to think about, but it has given the task team on assessment and reassessment a lot of food for thought, I think. So thank you for all the contributions. I think it's been a rich discussion, and please let us know via email, perhaps through Champ if you like, or you can write to me, anybody in the learning and teaching team, if you want specific things further. If anybody would like something on developing good feedback practices, we can set up a brief discussion on that if you would like it. We know that staff are being rather overwhelmed by numerous meetings and requests, and there are also other time constraints. So just let us know if you think it's something that's an option for you. I'd be happy to work with 3 people. It doesn't have to be a whole big group necessarily. So thank you very much. And Chantel, would you like to have the final word?
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Champ. I've been requested to do the vote of thanks, but I fear I might sound too formal. But I think from my side, I would like to thank all the colleagues that are present here today that have taken time from their schedule to make this valuable contributions to the discussion regarding this whole process of moving towards continuous assessment in light of the current challenges that we are facing. I'm especially grateful for teaching development for putting together these discussion series. I think it's helpful and knowledgeable to know what is going on where they interact and they implement, to understand the challenges that they are facing. And I think it's been a valuable learning experience for myself as well, where I've sat in on this discussion and just sat back and listened to what came from people that are working hands-on in the environment and the specific challenges they are facing. I've made quite a few notes in terms of what I will take with me from this, in terms of that the smaller things that we need to, in a sense, adapt as students and staff to the new situation. I think Noluthando, she mentioned that we have to face this with a responsive look in terms of adapting to the current situation. I've noticed that there is workload constraints on the staff and the moving towards continuous assessment, the understanding of what continuous assessment means. Does it actually provide the necessary learning experience to the students, or is it in fact continual assessment where there's an overload of assessment in the system? Also, in terms of the issue of plagiarism, which has come out quite profoundly, whether it was in the text and in the discussions, and how we can also ensure that students adhere to the necessary requirements and standards that are set. So in light of all of this, I would like to thank everyone for their contribution. It will be noted and taken on in further discussions. And thank you to all the staff that are present here that took time out of their schedule just to make this possible.
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Chantal.
thank you, Chantal, for thanking everybody. And goodbye, everyone, and keep on keeping safe.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.